on in, you guys. You know, I'm ready to get sick because I'd be cured instantly. We got everybody here. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to be here at the Brattleboro Memorial Hospital with Steve Gordon and Jill Zachary. You're the vice chair.
Yes.
And I was talking to Jill a little earlier, I served for 6 years on a board of a small hospital, Montescutney Hospital, and came to have a full appreciation about how providing health care in a rural community is easier said than done. And the doing of it takes enormous commitment. It takes really good management. It takes a dedicated staff. It takes a support staff. And it takes the support of the community. And this community supports this hospital. This facility is largely a result of an extraordinary fundraising effort and demonstrated the support that people here in Windham County have for this extraordinary institution. All we need to make it really secure is a federal partner that gets it right. And, you know, we're having our challenges in Washington these days where instead of doing our job, we get into gridlock politics and shutdown politics, and it's kind of crazy, and it makes me scratch my head, and it must bewilder you. You know, we have a Homeland Security budget, which includes funding for the Secret Service to keep the president and his family safe. It includes Border Patrol. It includes the airport security, and because some members of Congress have a point of view on immigration, they want to inject that in and shut the entire Homeland Security down. We had a shutdown of the entire government over a year ago when folks who wanted to totally repeal the Health Care Act decided the way tactically to accomplish that was to shut down government. And then even a few years before that, we had folks who said, you know, unless they got their way, we wouldn't pay our bills, that America would default on its debt. And that obviously makes no sense. That kind of approach to things means that our communities that are trying to be successful don't have the partnership from the federal government that they're entitled to have. And our job in Washington, as I see it, is to make it possible for people back home who are working hard, oftentimes against significant odds, to do your job better and with more security. And one of the things that's essential for our rural hospitals, like this hospital, is that we renew the Medicare-dependent hospital provision in the payment system in the Medicare Act to make certain that there's fair compensation that's the lifeline, the financial lifeline for our Medicare-dependent hospitals. In Medicare-dependent hospital, what it means, a lot of rural areas, there's a lot of older folks. And a lot of older folks need health care. And they come and they need a good institution like Brattleboro Memorial Hospital to get the health care they need. But that means that the reimbursement rates that this hospital receives for providing high quality care, which they will not compromise, they're getting reimbursed at lower rates than other institutions. And in the past, year by year, I've introduced legislation with Tom Reed, a Republican from upstate New York, really good guy who has rural hospitals in his district. And this is not a red state, blue state deal. It's not a red state, blue state situation. It's like, are we going to support rural America and older Americans who need health care? And that means supporting the hospitals that provide it. We've been successful in the past, but every year it's a high wire act. It's down to the last minute as to whether we're going to succeed again. We have that legislation again. This legislation, we're looking to get a 5-year longer term commitment. That makes sense, obviously. So that Steve and Jill know what the story is financially. And we're going to push that legislation again. We've reintroduced it. We've managed to get, in the past, a strong coalition of legislators who have rural hospitals in their districts. So I have some optimism that we'll get to where we need to be. But we really should make this permanent. We shouldn't put this burden of anxiety on the financial strength of hospitals like Brattleboro Memorial that really depend on getting fair reimbursement when they do more than a fair share of lower reimbursement care for very important people, the seniors who live in our areas. So I'm proud to be here with Steve and Jill to renew my commitment with my colleague Tom Reed from New York to get this done again and I hope we will, but I wish this wasn't something where we were hanging on by our fingernails up until the very last day for Congress to do at the last minute what it should do on the first day. So we're back at it. I'm going to be there, and I'm hopeful that we can succeed again so that you can continue doing the great work that you're doing for people here in Windham County that really depend on you showing up, being trained, working together, being a team, and making certain that those folks are healthy. So I want to turn this over now to Steve Gordon, President and CEO of this great institution. Steve, come on.
Thank you, Congressman. I see Dr. McClarney, who just got out of a surgical case. She has more surgery to do, so I'm going to ask her to jump in and while your patients get prepped and kind of comment on what it means to the medical staff and the medical community for this MDH.
Were you literally just operating on somebody?
I was literally just operating on a Medicare patient. So, there we go.
I'm telling you, we're going to tell Speaker Boehner, all right?
Exactly.
These folks are working so hard they have to come out and talk to you and send a message.
That is exactly right. And what I need people to know is that the funds from this bill ensure the financial viability of this hospital. And without the funds from this bill, our community cannot be served by our local hospital. And it's really important to our community that we have a local hospital. If you are older and you slip on ice, and we have lots of ice here, and you break your hip, you want to be treated in your community.
Right.
You want your friends and your family to come visit you. If your friends and family come visit you, you do better. We have better outcomes, and long-term, we spend less money on our patients. So please support this bill. It is vitally important. I want to give you a little anecdote from the other day. I was interviewing a potential physician who is going to be joining our medical staff, hopefully. And you know what he asked me? He said, "Is your institution financially viable? I do not want to move my family here if you're not going to be here in 10 years. He said, because I'm looking for a place to raise my family and establish my life for the rest of my life. And I looked at him and said, yes, we are financially viable, but without the funds from this bill, we may not be. And we cannot recruit quality medical staff to take care of our patients. And that's what's so important for our community. So thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Back to surgery. So,
Gordon runs a tight ship, you know?
So in the interest of time, I just want to make a couple of brief comments really related to the challenges that we face. And the number one challenge, as the Congressman said, is that continuous threat of losing MDH funding, which at the end of the day really puts us either in the red or in the black, whether we make a profit or whether we have a loss. And let me give you some numbers. So the MDH supplemental funding, if it was a full year, gives us $4 million. But the last year, we've only been funded at 6 months, which is $2 million. Our margin this year through the Green Mountain Care Board that was approved is a 0.7 margin. And they themselves expressed a lot of concerns that 0.7 doesn't get you to a point where you can reinvest in your hospital, hire the staff you need to hire. From a budgeting standpoint, it's long-term is not viable. So this is a critical piece of legislation, and the Congressman has been incredibly an advocate for us in this regard. And I can't tell you how important it is to all of us in our 600 employees and medical staff associated with the hospital. It, as Dr. McClarney said, it goes to our financial viability here in Brattleboro. The second major challenge is obviously the loss of 500 high-paying and well-benefited jobs at Vermont Yankee. And that's going to have an effect on us. And I look forward to working with the governor and Pat Moulton to try to bring more jobs to our communities. And ourselves and the Brattleboro Retreat are now the 2 largest employers in Windham County. So I look forward to dialoguing with them about how do we get more jobs more high-paying jobs, and well-benefited jobs into the community. My last comment really is in regards to Vermont's focus on reducing the cost shift. Everyone has kind of heard about the cost shift. There's a lot of debate in Montpelier about increasing Medicaid rates to moderate this cost shift. I got to tell you, for us, for BMH and our communities, the loss of MDH funding would truly exacerbate the cost shift, because Medicare makes up about 42% of our revenues here at the hospital. And we lose probably on Medicare about 40 cents on every dollar of cost. So although the state is interested in looking at Medicaid and increasing some Medicaid, if we lose this MDH funding, where are we going to make up that loss of MDH funding? Where are you going to do it? And, you know, unfortunately, it goes back to that cost shift, and it just further exacerbates the cost shift here. So I just want to thank you on behalf of all of the employees, the Board of Trustees, the seniors in this community, for your work on securing our funding for MDH.
Well, thank you for your
Thank
work.
you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Now, Jill, you want to come on up as the Vice Chair of the Board? Jill Zachary?
I do.
Thank you.
And a lot of what I'm going to say, you've already heard from the Congressman and from Steve, but I'm going to say it again. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, we really appreciate all of the hard work you do on our behalf and all of the MDH hospitals across the country. So thank you very much for
Thank
your
you,
work.
Jill.
We appreciate it. From our perspective as the board, passage of this legislation ensures that we can continue to provide good quality care and services to our Medicare population. These are our oldest and most vulnerable citizens here in our community that we need to take care of. An example of why H.R. 663 is so important to us is that it will allow us to continue to grow and expand the services for this population. A great example, I'm sure you're aware, a few years ago we opened our comprehensive wound care center. The majority of the patients that go through this center are Medicare patients, and we have improved the quality of life of a couple hundred people through this program. As we all know, we live in Windham County and we work here. This is the fastest aging county in the country, right? Wow. We have our own challenges here. Incumbent upon us as the Board of Trustees, our medical staff, and senior leadership here at the hospital, we need to make sure that we continue to provide quality care and can afford to provide quality care for our entire community. H.R. 663 is an integral part of having us achieve that mission. Thank you again for everything that you do for us. It is so greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great job. Okay, do you have any questions, Tim? For any of us? Yeah.
Congressman, great to see you. Just wanted to ask what the holdup is in Washington on this particular bill, since it seems to make sense from a variety of standpoints.
Well, it's Washington. So there's not, you know, in all seriousness, there's not a sensible answer to that question. It's gridlock politics, where instead of just solving problems and moving on, and then on areas where you disagree, putting them aside. So it's really a function of that to some extent. And the other issue, anything involving money in Washington these days, and for the last couple of years, has been a really contentious debate. And it's because there is a ideological group in Congress whose goal is to cut, that no matter what, not apply judgment. You know, you and your job and on the board have to look at that budget every single year and make tough decisions about where you're going to save a little money. But you also have to make tough decisions about where you're going to invest. Because if you want to be here tomorrow, you actually have to save and spend. Congress doesn't do that. So I'm not going to defend Congress. I'm going to do the best I can to make Congress do what it should be doing.
Could you give details? Mr. Gordon was talking about, no, Congressman, this bill, when does the funding run out and what's going to happen then?
Funding runs out March 31.
Yeah, it's March 31, and it's tied up with the doc fix, so-called.
What?
It's called the doc fix. Essentially, a number of years ago, Congress passed a bill that had as its goal to try to bring down the cost of care, and it didn't work. And in fact, if the doc fix is not fixed again, there would be an across-the-board cut in reimbursement rates to our physicians of about 22%. And this is at the low Medicare reimbursement rates. So this would just hammer our physicians. And by the way, a lot of these are the primary care docs who are not getting high reimbursements and are struggling to keep those practices open. It would have a really detrimental impact on access to care across the country. So in the past, Congress has come up with a, quote, doc fix, but on a year-by-year basis. We have used the necessity of dealing with the doc fix as the opportunity for us on the MDH funding to try to make that as part of it and actually negotiate to some extent on our votes to leverage the support we have among rural members of Congress, Republican and Democrat. So this is a March 31 deadline.
And so it really ends March 31st?
That's correct. That's right. And it's a situation where it's, quote, too big to fail in a way, because it would just have devastating impacts on physician reimbursements and then access to care. And the MDH, which is a smaller component of this, a much smaller, would have a really devastating impact on hospitals like Brattleboro.
So is there time to get this bill passed? And
There is.
Keep this funding, yeah?
There is time. Yeah, the answer to that is yes. There is time. But again, I'm not here to defend Congress. This is not the way we should be doing business. All right? We should be letting these institutions who have an obligation to provide this care to look over the horizon a bit so they can do some planning and manage. And that's one of the frustrations I think a lot of folks in Steve's position have, where they just don't know what the budget is, and at the midnight hour, I can call them up and say, hey, we did it again, and there's relief, but it doesn't give the timeline to do that future planning. Tim?
Looks like you're preaching to the converted here, Congressman, but what can we do to help?
Well, you know what? Everybody here who works in this hospital is doing everything that they can by providing good care to the local seniors. It's like the best thing any of us can do is do our job. And you're doing your job, and it's why you have so much support in the community. I mean, it's amazing to come in here and to see this facility. And I was here before this was here. And this didn't happen accidentally. This happened because people had faith in this institution. So you doing your job, that's what your contribution is. It's time for me to do my job and Congress to do its job in order to help you succeed.
So you mentioned ideology in Congress as one of the reasons behind this cut. But it strikes me that rural communities aren't the only communities with elderly populations. I'm surprised that this isn't more of an elder care issue and there aren't more people in Congress worried about it.
Well, you're right about that, but here's what I think is a little bit different. In some of the urban areas, their mix of patient population is less dependent on Medicare eligible people. So they'll benefit from a higher reimbursement rate with some of that non-Medicare population. But if you're in, I didn't realize this is the fastest growing aging population.
Aging.
Yeah, well, I mean, that tells you all you need to know. Folks are living on Social Security, low incomes, and they need health care. And so in those counties or those communities where you have that aging population, the Medicare reimbursement, the patient mix and payment mix is skewed towards the lower end of reimbursement. Yeah.
You had mentioned that it'd be your preference to have this measure become permanent.
That's correct.
So I'm curious to know how you arrived on the 5-year extension and if you think that's enough of a compromise to get it pushed through.
Realistically, I think it's going to be very tough to make it permanent because we end up having, here's what happens, you make it permanent, you've got to start actually being responsible in your budget. And Congress has a hard time with that. And it would involve the struggle between a group in Congress whose agenda is to drive down government spending of any kind, okay, except military, and lower taxes, especially on the well-to-do. And that's been the agenda for the last couple of years. You've got to have a balance, just like Steve having to deal in the real world. And it's always tough, but that's the problem. There's a lot of folks who think no government is the best government. I mean, it's kind of a weird place to be in Congress, because if you're in Congress, that's sort of a suggestion that you think you should be making government work. Well, I work with a lot of people who don't believe in government. And so it would be like half of you people are here working, but you don't believe in health care. I mean, that's sort of what it is. So, I mean, welcome to my world, you know? So thank you all very much.